We'll go ahead and get rolling here. I'm just going to fill in and kind of jump in ahead of Tom. I told Tom I'd throw him a little lifesaver. I know everybody will probably be half asleep, so I'll do my best to try and entertain to keep you from dozing off after lunch. We're going to talk here just real quickly. I want to talk about black swan hunting. I think it's just kind of fun. Just the term's kind of unique. Obviously, black swan hunting, everyone knows it's trying to predict the unpredictable. I mean, let's be realistic. How good are we at that? I really don't know. I would say we're not very good. But I think we need to start factoring this into our marketing plan. And that's what I talked about, having a secondary or backup plan in case. I think most of you know, some of the guys I was working with, oh, we went skiing last year, took the kids out to Copper Mountain. We get up there. As soon as I put the key into the door, turn on TV, tsunami hits in Japan. I'm on the phone the entire trip. My wife's kind of like, you got to be kidding me. See, so that was a black swan type event, not only for the market, but for the family. So 2 weeks later, I had to take another vacation, I think, to make up for that vacation. So kind of hit me double time. But, you know, we can just never predict what's going to happen. We tried to do our best. I think it's tough. But I think somewhere in your marketing plan, or somewhere in there, you got to have a little bit of an idea or where some possible black swan events are going to take place. These, unfortunately, I was out talking the last couple months, these black swan events have already kind of started to unravel here. So I'm not sure how black swan-y they are right now, but they're definitely events we need to watch as we move forward here. Here's really the main four I'm just going to quickly touch on and to give some guys an idea of why it's such an interesting aspect and what we need to pay attention to. Global debt, I think everyone knows we're going to go to the, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know, with higher protein levels, the world population going to 9.5 billion, and here we go. I mean, a good number to understand in that regards. We're adding about 200,000 people a day is what we're adding. So I like to listen to it. It makes a little bit more sense. I get into that million, billion, trillion thing. I never did have much luck getting my hands around. I told you guys last year, you ask your boss for 1 million seconds off work, you're off about 2 weeks. 1 billion seconds, you know, they say we'll see you back in 31 years. You ask for 1 trillion seconds, it's 31,000 years. I mean, that gives you an idea. The government throws around trillions like it's, you know, no big deal. So I think there's a huge big deal taking place, and the huge big deal is obviously with the global debt, the art of printing money. We're at 80 trillion. We went from 80 trillion to 210 trillion in 9 years. The way that this thing is tightly sprung, I'm telling you now, is a huge, huge issue. You'll hear folks like Andy and Emily and the rest of the very well-educated traders in the business. They have a hard time getting extremely bullish for one reason, right here. They can't get their hands around the logic of this nonsense. How can we be spending so much more than we have? How can we be doing it? How can we be leveraging to this extreme? Be careful getting yourself super tripped up in that thought. The market's trading on a different sphere, so to speak, right now, I would say. The market is already trading on a sphere that's taking this into account. So be careful if you just want to be doom and gloomy. Certainly there is the chance that we could have some type of unspiraling. The reason that the European banks are in the headlines and they are so important is because of the leverage that's associated with the European banks. The regulations and requirements are a lot less stringent than the U.S. banks. Therefore, you see money and what we would call speculative money or hot money flow to those regions. And if it unwinds or unravels, there would certainly be some reduction of long positions across the board, so to speak. There would be some risk-off reductions. Italy, a great example is Italy, I'd say, going from hero to a zero in 6 months. You take the 10-year from a yield of 5% to 6%, 1% move, and all of a sudden Italy, holy smokes, the wheels are flying off and we're crashing and burning. That is what we're in. That is the environment we're in. I have to believe, though, traders have become much more callous to it. Greece is ridiculous. It's a joke. There's no question. But the market's become callous to it to some degree. I don't think you're going to have a Bear Stearns type of debacle. I don't think you're going to see those type of Lehman Brothers things play out in this environment for one reason only. I think because we've seen that before. I think the central banks and some of the world banks were caught a little off guard. They didn't know how to handle it. They didn't know what to do. I'm not saying what they're doing now is right or correct, but I do know this, that they are somewhat prepared to an extent, and they are trying to curtail the issues and the fallout from that. So if you want to stay and lean bearish and just continue to be bearish because of this, market might leave you behind. So understand this is a factor, and it could create a hiccup. Will it? That's anyone's guess right now. But that is certainly one we need to watch. I think a great line is capitalism without bankruptcy is like Christianity without hell. Understand, some of these countries are going to have to go broke. They're going to have to go bankrupt. That's all there is to it. And I would have to believe, obviously, there's a lot more smarter people in this world than I am, and they know that. They understand that. They have their money invested with that in mind. They understand the risk. So it isn't going to be a complete shell shocker in my opinion. So I just tell people, have that somewhere in your marketing plan. Understand that you are going to get some headline trading off of this risk. And the guys that want to be bearish and make their living off being bearish, they're going to really stoke the fires. And that's the way this is going to go down, and that's the way this game is going to be played, I would say, from now until the end of time, it looks like, because I don't see any way out of this hole that we're in right now. So as I used to tell you, I tell you guys all the time, the letter played ball for a guy. He said, first rule of holes, when you're in one, stop digging. Well, I don't think the world governments have figured that rule out. So we continue to dig the hole deeper, and there continues to escalate issues and problems, but I think the world has finally come to some grips that that's what we're in, at least some of the smarter money, and they're going to learn to cope and deal with it as we move forward. You are going to see some speed bumps along the way. I call this a demographic tsunami in Japan. Funny story, Tom Willis, I'm traveling to South Dakota. Tom and I talked on the phone. We're just briefly talking. Tom, I'm getting ready to end the conversation. Tom says, what's your favorite trade? We're talking agriculture the whole time, ethanol and corn and wheat. He says, what's your favorite trade? Chase is driving me. I just left Iowa, we were talking. I see Chase do it. I tell Tom, I said, I just went short the Japanese yen. This was about, this was two and a half, 3 weeks ago. And I seen Chase look over at me like, what the hell? You talking to Tom Will? What'd you tell him short the Japanese yen? You're talking agriculture with the guy and you throw a Japanese yen trade on him. So we and Tom were talking a little bit. I just think, and it's been a great trade, and we've done well with it. You might have to hold on to it for a while. It's a long-term play we're looking at. I just think the demographics in Asia, and especially Japan, are obviously to a tipping point. To give you an idea, we're talking right now in Japan, a third of the population is over the age of 65. They're saying that number is going to move 40% in the next 10, 15 years. Whereas in India, you have 50% of the population under the age of 25. So as this population ages, the Japanese workers are being taxed more. The ones that are in the workplace who are having to support the elderly and have to support the older crowd that's emerging, they're being taxed and taxed and taxed. The Japanese savings rate has gone, I think they said 15, 20 years ago they were saving about 24%. Now they're saving about 3%. So there is no money really to save. Just as I told you, Italy making a 1% jump. If Japan experiences a 1% hike in rates, which they cannot afford to do, they're not going to allow it. You're going to see some serious hiccups. One reason we have to be concerned is this: Japan's biggest buyer of U.S. corn. Let's be realistic. If they start to run into an issue, you're going to see issues there. They're also a huge holder of U.S. stocks and equities. If Japan gets into some type of crunch and they get into a liquidity crunch and they have to start reeling it in, stock market may be in for a little hit. You could see some hits across the board. We're seeing for the first time, I said right there, Japan now running a trade deficit, first time since 1963. It kind of flew under the radar screen. Some of the smarter players and some of the smarter money is talking that may be the biggest headline of the year. Biggest headline, period. Japan cannot operate in that situation, running a trade deficit. How they got into that predicament was because of the tsunami having to shut down, and now they're importers of so much energy. It's thrown the balance sheets way off, and that's what you've seen take place. That's why you've seen Japan come in. The government's trying to intervene and lower the rate of the Japanese yen. So you've got what I like to say, I don't like to fight the governments. So if the Japanese government's trying to hammer the yen, I like to be on their side. It hasn't worked for them well in the last few years, but I see there is no other way they can function without a cheaper yen. Unfortunately, that is the environment that we're in. I think we all, though, need to really take a hard look at where this is at. Debt to GDP ratios at 230%. That's off the maps. I mean, you know, they were talking with the bailout, Greece is going to get their debt to GDP down to 120%. Japan's like twofold almost. I mean, they're off the charts as far as this speaks. So I got to believe Japan is in a very, very precarious situation, and I don't see it lightening up. I don't know if shorting the Japanese yen's the smartest play in the book. There's, I'm sure, a ton of guys out there, you know, that may be able to come up with some solutions or conclusions on better ways to short the Japanese economy. You may want to look into that or think about that. Just look for some more headlines and more ripples, probably to come from this environment, more so than any other as we move forward. European banks obviously are huge, but this could be a biggie here for U.S. corn market. So I think we just got to kind of play this out and see where we roll from there. Let's keep our eyes on it, though, in the coming weeks. Crude oil, fear in the Middle East. I've been talking about this one in the newsletter for a long time. 3 guys in the audience came up and said, "Ooh, boy, you saved me on the diesel fuel." So I hope people are listening and listening when we say and report some of the things we are. I'm going to go into later how I judge the market. And I should say how I handicap it. We've been able to really catch some big moves from the handicap, just general painting with general broad strokes on some of the turns and changes. Some of you folks know when I went to Chicago this summer, corn was trading north of 750. We were 750, 780 range. All of a sudden, I'm getting a lot of crap being called the big polar bear. All of a sudden, I got bearish up in there. Well, we got bearish ahead of the move, and we made some guys some great sales. We did do some good things, and I had some guys calling in to give me all kinds of crap. And then when all of a sudden we're breaking, last time I'm in Chicago over Christmas, hell, we're talking $4, sub $4 corn and sub $9 beans, and you know, the whole sky's falling. And then I flip-flopped on the 22nd or 3rd. I turned bullish, the rest of the crowd's fairly bearish, and now we move back higher. I'm going to show you guys some things to watch on how we handicap this thing, and I think you'll get a kick out of it, because more than anything, I don't want you to leave here and have to be dependent on me. I want you to learn how to look at these things yourself. I want to help you and give you the information, don't get me wrong, but I'd like for you to learn and take the information home so you can use it and do this, teach your kids. We've got that great program going on with all the colleges now. I don't know if any of you heard it. I'm donating, putting all the letters out to the college professors and those kids in the ag programs, because we had a lot of parents call and ask if we would help educate the students. I thought it'd be neat to give it to those guys for free, so I try and put it out just to let them learn the lingo and understand the info, and it's really been good. We've got colleges all over we've got them in South America now, South Africa. A lot of the big college professors here all take it. Chase will tell you it's pretty neat. 3 of the professors called, and they make it a required reading in their class, and they give the kids tests on this report every week or every 2 weeks. So I try and, you know, put some good info in those things that can help people learn how to do it themselves. This Middle East thing, we were telling guys we were selling $75 puts and buying 110 calls just as a little bit of a fuel, like an insurance kitty, we called it. It really isn't a direct hedge for diesel. Let's be serious. I mean, you know, some guys like to use heating oil and things. I don't see it. I think you get more tripped up than you do anything else. So we'll put on like some fuel. We just call it making a little money for the insurance kitty. And you had a chance to buy farm diesel below $3. You had to feel that your downside risk when oil got down into those 80, low 80s, high 70s, your risk is going to be to the upside to an extent. You had Saudi Arabia, their budget policy is set up to, they need $80 crude just from the recent money that they've tied up with the budget to try and appease the troops and trying to appease the crowds. I know Emily talked about the Arab Spring and those things. We're seeing that a lot. We're seeing the budget on some of these Middle Eastern countries rise. I told farmers, I said, listen, here's what you want to avoid. You want to avoid the markets controlling you. You have to get ahead of the game, so to speak. The last thing you want to do, you guys sit out here and you want to jack with this fuel and say, well, they say it's always the cheapest in February. Okay, well, we know that there's big risk to the upside, so we understand, we've heard people say there's potential for crude to go to 150 in 30 days. Well, here we are now at 110, 108 today. You got Brent at 120 some. Everyone's like, oh, that can't happen. We can't do that. And then there's the guys say, well, crude could go to 200 within 45 days to 60 days. Oh, no way. And you got guys now saying crude could go to 300 within 120 to, 3 months if some type of major outbreak plays out. So the last thing you want to happen is you get ready to go planting season and get ready to plant, and you have not bought your fuel. Now all of a sudden you're held at the mercy of the markets. We know crude can't maintain itself at $300. We know the world economies will come to a screeching halt, but I'll be damned if you don't have to buy your crude oil at the high of the market because you sat there and did not look at the risk associated with this situation. So understand and try and get ahead of the game. Don't look at price, understand the value, understand risk. So the big thing here and the big takeaway is that I still believe there's a ton of upside risk in crude oil. I believe the market's undervaluing it, period, plain and simple. U.S. has pulled out. U.S. has been there for a number of years. Egypt, who used to police the Middle East, they can no longer even police themselves. We've seen what happened. They're having massive problems internally. You have Turkey, who's now upset with Israel. You got Israel upset with Iran. Iran, who knows what's going to happen with Saudi Arabia. And you have to understand the issue is, just like I talked about that food line, no one wants in line behind China. China and India have low energy supplies, surpluses right now. Iran's one of their sources. Some of those sources in the Middle East. If they have to look all of a sudden for an alternative, they're going to jump in line and start bidding it up. And when they bid up the prices, here we go. We're taking off. That's what the market is pricing in right here. That's what people want to price into these markets. Funds want to believe a bullish story. A bullish crude oil story is a very easy one to sell. So understand that they're going to probably stoke these flames aggressively. So your risk, in my opinion, is still to the upside. Yes, I understand China's slowing. Yes, they could predict growth under 8%. Yes, I understand all of these things. But people want to invest in something, story of this nature. Money will flow in this direction on the drop of a dime if there is an issue. So you can be a brainiac and you can tell me all the S&D numbers and everything you want to about energy and about the economy and the world. But I promise you, if there is an issue over in these parts, this thing's taken off. So have fuel on hand so you are not held at that mercy. That's all I suggest. I just say have enough fuel to get you through the planting season, then let's readjust and see where we're at. I'm definitely not saying we can sustain those levels. You have the Saudi prince situation as well. Everyone's unsure of that. Saudi prince, obviously, the last couple of years Saudi king's been seriously sick in the hospital, in and out, numerous times. Understand it doesn't pass from brother to brother. I mean, it doesn't pass from brother to son. It goes from brother to brother. There's 10, 11 brothers, all in different areas of Saudi Arabia. Obviously, just like you guys and your families, when there's a death and there's money left, there's probably going to be some turbulence. There's going to be some arguing over it to who's in charge and who's not in charge. The brainiacs of the world say that if this takes place, this leaves Saudi Arabia the most vulnerable. Iran would look at this as some type of opportunity if they were to make a move. You would have internal issues taking place. You would have some, as Emily would say, inward-looking Saudi Arabia more so than ever. Saudi Arabia, I don't think, is afraid to rule by the sword as well. They've said it numerous times. So there is definite hostility. You have Iran right now who's getting a little bit upset as well with Saudi Arabia, I think, because Saudi Arabia now all of a sudden is making relationships with China. And they're making more relationships off over here. So I'm telling you, that whole OPEC nation and things are really, really brewing. And the people that are going behind Iran's back and making deals and cutting deals, it's starting to get, it's just starting to heat Iran up more and more. So who knows? I mean, every day it's a new headline, and every day it's, we're on the edge of our seat to see if Iran's going to launch the missiles, or Israel, or Saudi Arabia, or who knows. But I just want to leave you with that fact that you have to look at all of the dynamics that are taking place, and you have to factor these into your marketing plans. So be on your toes as far as the diesel fuel is concerned, especially. I went to one meeting in Iowa. It was Illinois, man. This was way back 2 months ago. There happened to be one of the diesel salesmen in the audience, and he's like, "Man, what do I owe you for that speech? That was great." He's like, "Got them all to get some oil, get some diesel." I said, I couldn't believe it. I was like, well, didn't plan on that. The next one, social networking. I kind of like this one just because I do think it is so important, and it has absolutely changed the world. A couple of speakers ahead of us have talked about it. You just really have a shift in power. I mean, the shift in power has gone from the institutions to the individuals, and that is what it is. Let's call it how we see it here. I think, you know, your WikiLeaks, you've got Twitter, you've got Facebook, you've got everything under the sun, and no longer can documents just be held or manipulated or hidden to an extent, and no longer is that the case. You know, I tell retailers or guys, I mean, you used to get your information from the corporation or upline, I would call it. Those decisions no longer, those don't matter. They could give you a sales skid sheet on corn or beans or a new product of fertilizer that you don't care. You're going to get your buying decisions from your friends and your peers around you because it has become so easy. Social networking has changed the entire game from politics down to sales, information, all the way along the spectrum. The other issue, and I think Emily alluded to, is youth unemployment soaring around the world. Now, come on. You've seen my son. He's 16 years old. My daughter's 14. My wife says, if you don't keep these kids busy, they're going to get into trouble. I said, no way. She says, now I know how you were, and my sister would probably tell you, I was perfect. Just kidding. I was a little ornery. So understand, like she says and points out, when you have a youth population who is out of work, I think right now, what do they say in Spain? Youth unemployment's running at 50%. U.S. here, we're at 23, probably, those are the numbers we see realistically, we're probably 25, 26. As the older population has had to come down the food chain, so to speak, as jobs, and they've taken the jobs from the younger kids, those jobs aren't available. So now you have the younger population with access to social networking. Imagine, when I was 16, no job, say, we want to have a party at Jay's house. With social networking, that could have been real quick, and we could have had Jay's house torn up in 20 minutes. His parents would have been blowing up. So, you know, it took a little more power to have those parties and have those types of things going on. So that's no longer the case. That's why we get these crazy Occupy Wall Street movements. Next thing, we got 200,000 people in a park outside of New York. I mean, boom, blink of an eye. Same thing happening in, you know, across the whole entire Middle East. They obviously banned Facebook and those types of things in China. China just says we can't have it. And you're getting these underground things popping up and things of that nature. So this social networking deal is going to seriously change the way the game is played. I think, you know, either you can call it, we're going to have another hippie movement. I was talking to some guys at the last meeting I did, and they said, oh yeah, it was the one out in Arizona with Ron. And he was just telling me where he was from in California, and he did a lot of stuff with you know, fertilizer. And he said one of their biggest customers was the people growing weed. You know, they legalized pot out there, so they're buying all this different stuff to grow, you know, to grow marijuana. And I'm like, no kidding. He's like, yeah, there's a couple of, he goes, there's 3 or 4 counties down there you go into. He's like, it is a complete throwback down there in some of those areas. I said, what are you talking about? He said, they're driving like VW buses and little wagons and got kids rocking around, no shoes and peace and doing the whole hippie movement thing. And I said, you gotta be kidding. He's like, no, I swear. He's like, there's a whole throwback going back that way. And I've learned through the years as I've traveled back and forth, you generally see the trends pick up on the coast. You know, if you go out, one guy told me, he was a business whiz, he said, go to the coast, just fly to New York City, or you go to California, go out to LA, go to the hotel, check in, get the yellow pages, that's when they had yellow pages, and just look in there for headings of businesses that you don't have back home. I was from a small rural town here. You'd be amazed, and he's like, that will give you an idea of what type of business you want to ever start, because the trends usually start on the coast and work their way inward. So I think you're seeing this hippie movement thing come to fruition. I think the social networking is allowing these people to, you know, voice their opinions and be heard to an extent. And I think it's obviously going to affect our markets quickly. One easy one and one I'd like to note and talk to guys about. Last time I was in Chicago, I went to a couple of parties up there. One I was at, there were some guys there that were talking about black box trading, asking me all these questions about Twitter. As you guys know, I just got a Facebook account last year. Still don't even know how to use the damn thing. I think my daughter probably better at it than I am. And I used Twitter and got on there and started figuring that out. Well, they said, oh, you know all about Twitter. And I said, yeah. And I wrote in one of the stories, Tebow, you know the day Tebow beat the Steelers, he set the record for the most tweets per second, 9,800 a second or something. Everybody and their brothers firing across Tebow. Now we got Linsanity, and and these tweets are coming across faster than when Bin Laden was killed, faster than some of the big events. All of a sudden, he tells me, well, we've hired some hotshot kids, and we've built these algorithms that can tell how many tweets, how many times the word corn comes across Twitter. Let's say if we average 50, and all of a sudden we see a bump to 200. We immediately will put on a strangle or straddle or some type of position that tries to capture the volatility in the markets. And they'll do that with words soybeans or wheat and different words off Twitter to track the volatility of what's being said across the markets. They don't really care about, they can't tell you obviously direction immediately on the blink of an eye, but they can tell you if all of a sudden some news has come out that has popped the market. And with that comes the high frequency trading. With that comes the flash crash that we saw in the stock market. With that's come a lot of things that we really just don't understand or know how it goes together. I urge everyone in here, start watching Twitter a little bit, start learning these things. I'm telling you, that's where the movement's going. That's where the shift is headed. The social networking is going to change the way business is done. I've been blessed to be around some awesome people that are very, very smart. And one of the best things I heard, I was at a banquet thing. I don't know whether it was one of the lines Bill Gates had said or one of the Steve Jobs, one of the very smart people in the world. And they said, we overestimate what happens within the next 2 years. Always. We tend to overestimate any change in the next 2 years. We drastically underestimate any type of change taking place in the next decade. 10 years, we are not good at. No one is good at it. The best are not good at it. We drastically underestimate what takes place in the next 10-year time frame. It's important to realize, especially coming from guys that they spent millions and millions of dollars trying to estimate and project. And within a 2-year time period, we just overestimate just make everything like it's just the biggest deal known to man, and it ends up probably fizzling out. I thought it was an interesting note along those lines, and I know this sounds hard to get your hands around, and I'll get to it later in the program, but they say by 2030, a lot of these seed manufacturers think we can be at 300 bushel corn. So keep that in mind. I know we underestimate what we can do. Understand where we've come from and where we're going. We could go to 300. It's possible. That's what they want to see. That's their movement. So don't sit there and underestimate what can happen within a 10-year period. I think Emily did a great job of saying what's happened from 1960 to now. I'm telling you, you don't have to go that far. This thing's moving fast. Social networking, in my opinion, has to take some precedence in your guys' marketing plan. Whether it is getting on Twitter where you can see what's happening quickly. A lot of what I'm going to talk about too later and what you guys need to have, we have got to get marketing plans that we can make a decision quickly. Ken Dallenberg will come up here and talk to you. We've tried to move in that direction with this deal we've done with Grainbridge and we're trying to get quotes piped right into our marketing plans. This is what Grainbridge is allowing us to do now. We're piping the Chicago Board of Trade quotes directly into our marketing plans. So we got a living, breathing plan at a snapshot, boom. If you want to come home at midnight and see right where we're at, trading right then, you've got it. Whether you can tie in your positions from the futures, or if you're doing spread trading or option trading, cash sales, HTAs, any type of where your basis is, and all of a sudden you have a complete snapshot right here, right now. That is going to be critical, because I've talked to tons of guys this year, and I've talked to them when we were, I can probably give you the example later on in the program, but when we were up trading past 750, I'd call them one of them, they were up in Canada, said make a sale, we're trading about 780, 770, somewhere in there. I could tell he was busier than a one-armed paper hanger when I called. What's up? He had to fire one of his hands. He's going nuts. Kevin, okay, what do you got? I said, we got to pull the trigger on some sales. Okay, I'll get to it. He says, man, I'm busy. He said, probably be a couple weeks before I get back to the office and get all my books, get my stuff squared. I said, Lenny, 2 weeks, boy, we're dinosaurs. This market might fall to pieces, sure as can be. There we went. So we have to have a plan and some strategies and tools that can move as quick as these markets are moving now. I want everyone to make sure they understand that before they leave here today. Let's work on getting a plan that we can just pull the trigger quickly and efficiently and easily, because this right here has sped everything up. And I have to believe this is really where it's going. We see it in the headlines nonstop, and this to me is just what we've come to. You know, they say Facebook, 1 in 9 humans has a Facebook account. That seems unbelievable. 1 in 9 across the world, Facebook account. 14, they throw some astronomical numbers out for businesses that are using it. And I drug my feet, just say, it'll be a fad, it'll be a fad. It's not. I mean, I think it's here to stay. You're seeing people move further and further in that direction, and it's going to be where we're at. So I hope everyone takes that information, tries to find a way that can fit in, and go from there. So that's it for that Black Swan part.